But I know, Alexander, you wanted to mention something following Ivor's discussion.
Ivor explained quite well, in fact. So what we can conclude what Ivor said. Basically, the employer of the World Health Organization are entrepreneurs, businessmen, oligarchs. So what connection do these people have with governments? In reality, they're like business people. So
they negotiate.
They're going to negotiate a deal, no matter what it is. So the idea of health, unfortunately, flies out of the window, because the greater the oligarch is, the more his contract is going to be bound with the WHO. And real science, unfortunately, will not function. When you have real science eventually coming into a pandemic, the WHO will not listen to anyone. Only the individuals that have signed up as the experts and the pharmaceutical companies that are going to provide the service. So we have to be very careful here, and this is where I am a bit worried and hesitant, because Malta, unfortunately, is a small country. We don't have the ability to stand up and talk for ourselves. You can notice this because I analyze what's being discussed in the treaties, and I have realized that the Maltese participation is nil. Completely nil. Sure. And I also can conclude, unfortunately, that even the European Union participation is nil. And I can conclude this very, very basically because the corrections, each correction is followed by a country code. Now, you can go and scour through thousands of pages and you realize that Malta is not participating, which is extremely sad and worrying, because we elect people to stand for us. We want our representatives to go and actually see what's good for Malta. So a comma, a full stop, a change of word legally can mean a lot of things. So in other words, our politicians are happy to stand back behind the scenes and accept anything across the board from businessmen, which in my opinion we cannot continue moving in this direction. Also, what is also worrying, which I must emphasize, because we in the past had so much, we looked up to the WHO as being such a great institution. It should have been, but it's not no longer. We have relinquished our rights to actually ask and choose our own medicines, because our parliament in the past decided to vote and convert any recommendations from the WHO and turn it into law. Now,
we gave up our sovereignty.
That's what it means, completely. This is why we have a silent parliament. This is why we have all our doctors silent, because what can they talk about when it's law? It's done.
But shouldn't the people be aware?
No, this is the whole point. This is why I'm here. The people need
to signing
but
anything.
They didn't realize. They thought that the government, as being the rightful person to take care of our interests, was doing the right thing. I can conclude today it's no longer viable, because we are exposing ourselves in health issues, in the 17 sustainable goals, in the climate change. We are closing an eye and standing back and not even participating. This mustn't continue. So what I recommend, really, anyone who wants to run up into the future, take control of this country, stand up, be a man, and change that law. That law cannot stand any longer on a simple recommendation. How can you turn a recommendation into law where you force people into the future to take medicines or vaccines that haven't been tested, or have been tested and the tests are hidden for us to realize what the consequences are, like we have seen in the Pfizer report, for example? So we have to look forward, we must stand up, protect our interests, and the interests of our families, and the interests of our children into the future. So this is my opinion. We have to change the law.
In Malta we have a patients' charter, right?
Yes. James, David can explain further on this subject.
So patients have their rights.
The patient charter that you're referring to is on the website of the Department of Health here. It's very easy to download. It's not so easy to find, but once you do find it, it's very easy to download. I would encourage everybody to take a read. It's only a handful of pages, and it sets out your rights and your responsibilities, which is only fair. So if you are going to have the benefit of these rights, you also have your own responsibilities. But it encourages things like asking your doctor questions, asking for more information, or asking for the research to support why something is positive or negative for your health, involving your family in discussions so that you actually can get a second opinion effectively, because when you're the patient, you're not always necessarily listening to everything because you have
you're in a vulnerable state of mind.
A compromised mindset.
Yes.
To have the involvement of your family, of your close people, it's incredibly important, because then you can repeat and go over these things again and again. It's a very straightforward document. It can also be found from our website, and we would encourage everybody to consider it, especially when you are going through these processes. The law that Alexander was talking about is the law that basically introduced the international health regulations, which we're about to talk about with the next two guests. And when we do talk with them, perhaps we can bring up a bit more about that law, because they're the experts.
Excellent.
Can I just say one thing? When they were passing the Treaties Acts, the American government made a pre-act law, they call it. Now, in the European Union, there was something similar. They just changed the text. And the pre-act law basically protected all the manufacture, all the decisions ministers take, all the decisions doctors take. And this is in the time of a pandemic, I must mention. So as soon as there is a pandemic, the fact that all governments have agreed to get involved with the pre-acts, unfortunately, we as individuals, as patients, have lost our rights to even talk. Because the doctor will stand there and say, I have to obey and I won't be sued. That's the bottom line. This is why we have quiet doctors in the whole of the island. Yes. It pays them to be quiet.